Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Manufacturing Live. Today, we're actually going to talk to someone really cool. Someone that is very, very good at high-end components. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike, and thank you for having me. Happy Mardi Gras, everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a great day and out there having some fun. So Northern Industrial Manufacturing, I'm the vice president, and we're a manufacturer of precision components, predominantly shims, thrust washers, and other metal components that go into axles, transmissions, differentials, as well as a wide variety of other more power transmission type components for either automotive or heavy duty truck markets.
So you actually make the world move, is what you're telling us, right?
We do. Yep. We make the world move, and it's been our passion. We've been in business for over 40 years. It was actually started by my grandfather. I'm the third generation with the company, and things are just going great. We're able to work every day with my dad, still very active in the business, and we're having a lot of fun lately.
Very, very cool. So when you say shims and thrust washers and things like that, can you explain a little bit about what that is for people that may not know what those are?
Yeah, sure. So where we play in the assembly of the car or truck is, although somewhat complicated, it is relatively simple. And the way we like to explain it is if when you're bringing in all of these components together from a bunch of different suppliers, let's just say for very easy math that there's 10 other suppliers that go into, say, the axle or the transmission. Well, when the engineers who, using Solidworks to design their beautiful products, go to design the component, there's no such thing in the manufacturing sector as perfect. And so these engineers, when they're designing and when the buyers are buying, they're buying from suppliers very similar to me who have a specification associated or a spec associated with their part. Now, to make things in again an oversimplified manner, let's say that the supplier can either in the 10 suppliers that can deliver their components either plus one of the spec, they can deliver the parts perfect, or they can deliver the parts minus one to the spec. What ends up happening is as you bring in those 10 suppliers and those 10 components from those suppliers, they could all miss the mark, still be within spec, but make it to plus one on the spec. So when you add them all together, those 10 suppliers would be plus 10. They could all come together and be minus one. So if they all come together, they'd be minus 10. Or they could be some function in between the minus 10 and the plus 10. And so what they end up doing with our product is they wait until everything's brought in, and then let's say it comes in at minus 10. Well, then the production floor will call a plus 10 shim from Northern, and when you take the minus 10 and the plus 10, that gets you your perfection. And so it's kind of a unique space to be in because you technically don't know what your customers are going to be needing until quite literally the minute that they need it. And so it causes a lot of bullwhip in the supply chain where there's, you're humming along at 10,000 pieces a week and you're not supplying any of another part every week because you're at 50 pieces a week. And then something happens in the supply chain and that's switched. And all of a sudden, overnight, you're now in a circumstance where 10,000 pieces is required of the part that used to only be at 50. And now that part that you were humming along that used to be at 50, is now 10,000. So it's a very unique and rewarding position to be in, and we feel at Northern that we're one of the world's best at this very specific niche.
And it's a very important part, right? Because one of the things that often gets overlooked in engineering, it seems more so today with less people having a real world experience, is you can put a tolerance on a print, but when you really stack those up to go in an assembly, when you're talking mass production of components, even one-offs, The that Stackup Analysis has a big variation, and it's also a big reason for 200,000 vehicles being recalled, right? Because someone missed a stack up and then everything fails. And as you were talking there, it reminded me when I was in high school, my grandfather owned Alice Chalmers dealership. So we had Heston, we had Alice, we had Otana, we had all that stuff. And there's that old adage of you're sitting in school in algebra and it's like, I'm never going to use this stuff. But the way the Fiat transmission is made in a Heston tractor going way back is it's all stacked up on shims. So you have to do algebra in the stack up to figure out how many shims you need for what piece, because when you go to rebuild it, they just send you a whole bunch of shims to put in it. So it's funny that it's sort of, 25, 30 years later, like it's sort of come full circle that I actually get to talk to the person that makes the shims here. So I heard through some of my peers that you guys are an outstanding supplier. You've actually won the GM Award 8 years in a row now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we've definitely been able to find ourselves in a circumstance where we've won quite a few different awards. So as you mentioned, we've won the General Motors Supplier Excellence Award 8 years in a row, which again is very exciting. It's just a real commitment to quality, a real commitment to customer service, as well as engineering and technical support. To get that, you basically have to be 0 ppm in terms of your delivery. Parts per million is the number of bad parts that you'll ship in a year. And then you also have to be 100% on time for your deliveries. And then you have to end up getting a grade from purchasing and engineering of Superior for your customer service and technical support. And yeah, we've got an absolutely tremendous team, and we work really, really well together, and been fortunate enough to put ourselves in a spot to win that award 8 years in a row. And then the other award that we're very happy for is a couple years ago we won the ZF North American Supplier of the Year, which I not an expert on how many suppliers the fourth largest automotive company in the world has, but it's quite a few. And for us to be in their top 3 suppliers for North America, just really rewarding, and very thankful for the position that we're in. And it's a team. I mean, it really when you operate any type of manufacturing environment, one member at any level of the organization can be that team member that causes you to manufacture bad parts or to make those mistakes. And the tough part about perfection is 365 days out of the year, your entire staff has to be on, and you don't get one member to be off for 5 minutes because that perfection is broken. And so, yeah, we really are proud of the awards, proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and it's certainly a team effort, and couldn't do it without them, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that gets understated a bit more important as we start talking skills gap and labor and all of that good stuff into it. But so there's a couple questions I want to follow up on there, what you explained, because what is the manufacturing process that you have to develop thrust washers and shims for people that may not know what it takes to make those?
Yeah, so we've got a wide variety of manufacturing processes that are in-house. And so one of the unique aspects about the business, I was explaining it a little earlier, a lot of suppliers can stamp. So what our operations entail, we've got stamping, grinding, vibratory finishing, media finishing, deburring. Those are basically the same. Color coding, we have heat set in-house, obviously shipping and quality. Where I was going earlier with that is what makes our business model and the niche commodity that we serve, because our customers can't give us a forecast of how the 10 suppliers in their system are going to come in, we have to have a very, very tight and short supply chain. And what ended up happening, and my grandfather and father figured this out 30, 40 years ago, is you can't necessarily rely on other suppliers in a long, lengthy supply chain, because your customer just told you that they need part X, and that's what they needed last week, but they just found out today at about 6:45 a.m. that what they needed last week is no longer relevant, and they need something this week that they haven't ordered for 5 years in some cases. Well, you can't have a very lengthy supply chain because now your customer's at risk of going line down. Certainly, it's not Northern's fault that they would be going line down, but we still take immense, claim and pride on keeping them up. And so what we've done is we've vertically integrated. And what's unique about Northern is there's many companies out there that stamp. So this is the punch press that goes up and down, makes a lot of noise, brings in coils of steel, and then turns that coil of steel into some form of finished product. Lots of companies do that. We then go into grind. There's quite a few companies that grind. Most of the time, these companies, they're going to take the parts that the stampers have stamped or the forgers have forged, and they're gonna grind those into an individual thickness. There's even fewer companies that do the deburring and the media finish. But again, these companies take parts that are being supplied from a stamping company or a grinding company, and they take the burr off, they add the rust inhibitor. Well, because of the need for the tight turnaround and the very, very tight supply chain, we brought it all in-house. And so we don't necessarily have to wait 3 or 4 days for transit to a supplier, or we don't have to necessarily wait 4 weeks for them to get it ran through their press or through their grinders or through their deburring media machines. And so we have circumstances, and it does happen, where a supplier or a customer will shift, and they'll go through that exercise where they'll call us and say, hey, I know I haven't ordered this in 5 years, but I'm out and I literally need 5,000 of these a week. Most companies are going to say, well, guess what? Standard lead time, 6 to 8 weeks. Go figure it out. You didn't give us 6 to 8 weeks. That's the time we gave you. We need that much. Most suppliers really that I've dealt with are going to say that. We have the ability in-house in a lot of different times, not obviously all the time, but to be able to say, you know what? Yes, we've got you covered. It might not be 24 hours, although we've done it in 24 hours. We're going to try to set up a plan and get things handled and covered for you within 48, 72 to at least get you out of trouble, and then work on a backflow for the supply chain and run an analysis on where we can make up time to get you the bulk of the runner back in play. And
Okay.
so, yeah, we use a variety of in-house processes, and that helps us to streamline what we're doing to help our customers every day.
Okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like a lot of companies over the years, it seems like they went from, being able to do a lot of stuff to I'm just going to do one piece and then rely on others. And it's sort of starting to come full circle to where there's value in being able to control my own destiny, because my urgency is not someone else's urgency.
Never. Yeah. Never.
The other thing that sort of came out there as you were talking is there's sort of two things that it sounds like that makes you unique in the marketplace. One is your communication with the people that are buying from you. The other thing is the culture internally that you have to get your teams to understand that, like, hey, this is always evolving and always changing. We can't be mad about it. We just have to accept that that's what it is. So can you talk a little bit about those 2 points? Like how are you being so open with, the people you serve, but then also creating a culture for that? Because it seems like that's a challenge in itself.
Yes, and you hit the nail right on the head. So yeah, there's really 2 fundamental key aspects to our business, and you hit it right on the head. So yeah, the first is the support of our customers, and we've got a great subset of customers, and it really is a partnership. And with that partnership does come some give and take in both directions, where we do require a little bit extra in some cases from our customers to get a fundamental understanding of, all right, what is being consumed and what is your backwards looking supply chain look like? I mean, are you using the -3 shim? Are you using the 0 shim? Are you using the +2 shim? And getting that data, in some cases daily, weekly, or monthly, is absolutely key, but it's key for both parties, because one of the unique challenges even that our customers have is most of our customers, and try explaining this in an auditor for those of you in the manufacturing world who are getting audited by an IATF or ISO type organization, our customers, just about all of them, they don't actually provide us with purchase orders or releases for the product that they're consuming, because it's happening so quickly. Electronic data interchange, EDI, isn't able to effectively understand what's being consumed, because, like I said, you don't know until it's consumed. So you can't do a sophisticated data load on an electronic data interchange to where you're signaling to us as the supplier, here's what I'm going to need the next 6 months, because quite literally, you technically don't know what you need in an hour from now. Now, we overlay some different signals that we receive from our customers with a supply chain and with a weighted blended forecast, which I won't get too into the details on. And that only works with the data that we've received, and the data's only good until the next time we receive the data. So if we go weeks without the data, well, that data may have been irrelevant 2 hours after we received it. It might not have been irrelevant, but it certainly could have. So working with our customers to try to flush some of that out, and they understand too that because they don't have a visibility on what they're going to consume, we're certainly in this together, and we've had a really outstanding partnership with all of our customers. The other piece that you mentioned that was very interesting is culture, and I'll admit the culture that we've been able to develop over the last 45 years has been certainly one of customer focus, extreme, intense customer focus. I mean, in terms of knowing what our customers are consuming at a much more detailed rate than even our customers know and understand, because many of the higher level employees or members of our customers, they're not going to necessarily need to be into the weeds like we are to understand that, the number 5 shim on that particular line now is moving when it never did. They just don't have a need because they have us, and that's the main value proposition. So the culture of intense customer focus has been, I think, what got us to this point. But what's very interesting about the question and the way you asked it is we've not stopped there. So one of the things that we've done is we've actually partnered with a couple different firms that are really helping us on this cultural piece. And I think it's something worth noting to the manufacturers out there at all organizations that company culture really, really matters. And to some of us manufacturers that are out there, we're into the weeds, we're firefighting, we're on that hamster wheel every single day. And sometimes we're so into it that we don't really realize that by fighting today's fires, we're not able, to build tomorrow's houses. And what we've been trying to do here, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, is a very comprehensive overhaul of our company culture. And it's not easy. We've had a great culture, good success, big time customers. I mean, you start looking at our customers, Daimler, Mercedes, General Motors. I mean, these are big customers. So we're right there. We're right there in the mix, but we don't want to stop and rest on our laurels. And so partnering with these different firms, we've come up with a variety of different kind of cool, different discussion points where, whether it be hiring practices, we did a fun game with our employees, divided the entire company into 5 teams, and ended up saying, okay, guys, ownership wants to positively affect culture. We're going to do a Shark Tank type event where the owners are all going to be the money people, men and women, and we want you to sell us on your idea to positively impact company culture. Shut the company down for a full day and did this exercise. and we were blown away at what our employees were able to come up with. And we were fighting over these ideas. And so different ideas like that and employee surveys, we had never engaged our employees in a formal Gallup type survey. And we were blown away at some of the different topics that we just thought, gosh, we are so good. We're a great ownership has done such a good job on X, Y, and Z. And our employees at pretty much all levels said, well, actually, these I think are some things that you need to improve upon. And just taking those surveys, we actually, this is year 2, we just finished the surveys. So results haven't been published yet, but looking at things like that is what do your employees really think of you? And then taking that and positively embedding that into company culture. And it's not easy, but I can tell you our ownership and our leadership team here is super committed to just that piece, because if your employees are happy, they're engaged. And if they're engaged, they can go 8 full years without making a mistake to your largest customers. And you bolt that on top of some of the technology pieces that we've implemented through Delmia Works, and it's a home run. And so we just could not be happier.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a few things there, because you're talking 40 years of doing things that others aren't, right? Because when you're competing against some of the other tier suppliers, like to those big organizations, it's literally an ocean, and you're trying to stand out in that ocean of everyone else doing, yeah, I can do that, yeah, I can do that, but they don't hold up their end of the bargain. You couple that with a generational change that we're all seeing in manufacturing, and then what's important to the new generation coming in is very different than what's important to, I hate to say it, my side of the generation these days. In those things, did you find, like, when you were doing the surveys and you were asking questions and like even working with the next generation of buyers, and then we throw in TikTok and Amazon and all those immediate, like, right now things, how have you changed how you think about stuff? Because it's very different than you or myself or your dad, and like how we were treated growing up, than like what the next generation coming in would be.
Yeah, and I mean, very, very loaded and intricate question. So I'll try to take it in pieces. I think the first, in terms of standing out amongst the crowd, very challenging, right? So my business, we have such a unique and niche business that, and I don't blame our customers either, because like when you look at our business, one of our customers, we literally represent 65% of the SKUs that customer, it's $1 billion plant. They're buying $800 to $700 million worth of product. We represent 65% of the part numbers that they purchase. Oh, by the way, I mentioned those are unforecastable parts that they're purchasing. And it only might represent, let's say, $6 to $8 million worth of spend. So you start to do the math and you say, okay, well, I'm buying $700 million worth of stuff, and 65% of my stuff is from one supplier. And oh, by the way, I can't even forecast that 65%. As long as that customer's happy, the barrier to entry and the barrier to exit in my business, extraordinarily high. We don't bring on a lot of new customers, and we don't lose a lot of new customers for that reason, because why would you want to rock the boat on $10 million worth of spend that's 65% of your business and you can't forecast it if the supplier's doing a good job? And so that goes somewhat both ways, right? Because at the end of the day, if I'm, let's say I think I'm the best, because we do think we're the best. If a different customer has a supplier that represents 65% of their spend, less than 1% of total dollars, and 65% of total SKUs, if I gave them the parts for free, which obviously I can't do, could that might not still even be worth it to come over to my business. So what we've been trying to do is appeal to that next generation, and we're doing so through a couple different, mostly web-based techniques. My philosophy, the marketers out there probably aren't going to really love it, but my philosophy has always been, if we're going to invest in marketing, which our marketing budget is very small. I mean, I would be embarrassed to even give you the number. And if anyone out there thinks they have a smaller marketing budget than me, if you have a marketing budget, you probably don't. But what my philosophy has always been, and I've incorporated this here, is if we invest in the asset itself, we can always have our website out there fishing. I like fishing. It's a good analogy. If you spend $1 million on a Google advertisement to pay for eyeballs, after the $1 million has run out, you've got to go out and spend another $1 million for eyeballs. My philosophy, again, because I don't need 100 customers, if we bring in 1 or 2 new customers in a year, I mean, they're big customers, that's a good thing. So instead of trying to, put ourselves out there with paid advertising or things of that nature, what we focus on is really building our website, optimizing the website, search engine optimization, and then having the website portray a level of concept mastery. And when people and buyers and engineers end up doing a Google search or end up doing a part search, that website, if we spend a small amount of money this year, I get credit for that next year and the year after and the year after. So all of a sudden, that small amount that we invested 10 years ago and then 9 years ago and then 8 years ago, when you get to year 10 or 11 or 12, all of a sudden you've got this giant website that incrementally costs nothing, very small amount, but then overall ends up with a very nice, clean looking presence that catches a lot of different suppliers and customers in a net. I'll just use a funny story real quick on this topic, and then we can move on. But I was actually at the FabTech show, and I saw the Delmia crew, Delmia Works crew, and Dassault, everybody there. But I was out with a vendor. We were out, having drinks. That's sort of tends to happen at these different events. And I was with one of my vendors, and I'm not going to mention the vendor's name. She'd probably really be mad if I even told the story. But we were talking, and they make their number one business is compound tooling. They're a tooling manufacturer that we use. And I was just telling her how proud I was about this website. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I know very little about marketing, but I've got it stuck in my head that I'll play a marketing person on TV. And we were just chatting, and she was just complaining, oh, I never get new customers. I want new customers, but they are just hard to come by. And she had also just updated her website. And I said, well, what are your keywords? What are your keywords? Oh, I have 400 keywords. And I'm like, well, I don't know a lot, and I'm not going to tell you how to do your business, but what's your 1 keyword or 2 keywords? Let's start there. And she goes, compound tooling. Okay, compound tooling is their keyword, and they're our supplier. So we're having a few drinks, so my confidence is very high in myself. But anyway, so we all Google. I go, okay, let's all take out our phones and just let's Google the keyword. Let's see where we're at. Compound tooling. Again, this is just a supplier. And who's the number 3 vendor on compound tooling? Northern Industrial Manufacturing. So I had a very throwaway section of our website that we optimized, because a supplier who wants components that are produced off of compound tooling, if somebody typed in compound tooling shim, we wanted to be there. Well, what was hers? She was on literally page 9, not number 9, page 9. So you've got 20 per page or whatever you have. So this just shows you the power of that incrementalism, where we're able to find ourselves being searched on these patterns. And so it's not quite manufacturing, but there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have really poorly built websites.
Yep.
And for those of you out there, $10,000, $15,000 with the right company gets you in the game for your first one, and even less than that annually, and you could have one of the best websites. So if folks are out there struggling, that would be something that I would look into to try to appeal to this latest generation.
Well, I think it comes down to being outside looking in. It comes down to knowing your identity and knowing what you do, right? And I think that also leads back to culture, leads back to the success you have, is because you know what you're going to do and what you're going to be good at, and you continually optimize those things. You don't get up in the morning and be like, hey, we do stamping, let's put in a bunch of Swiss machines and we'll just start doing high-end turning for transmission parts. I think that is where a lot of companies get lost. I think that's where a lot of manufacturers get lost, because the world's changed in 40 years, right? And if you didn't start out with a focus or a mission, you were sort of in this ocean of, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'm trying to survive. And when you go to put a website and you go to do marketing and someone's like, well, can you mill this or cut this or weld this? The answer is always yes. And although you can be very good at all of those, when you're trying to gain new business, you don't really have an identity that separates you from other people. That's what I hear in what you were explaining there. And it seems to be true. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, you can have anything you want from us as long as it's round, flat, and shiny. Anything. I mean, Henry Ford, you can have any color you want as long as it's black.
That's right.
On the Model T. So that's really our model. And we've had some hard conversations because, as you can imagine, when you become very good and such a close niche, such a close relationship with our customers, they've asked us, hey, why don't you go into this? Why can't you, I'm struggling with this. Can you bail me out? And it's like, no, we can't. We don't do that. We do the one thing, we're the best in the world at it, and that's all we do. And we end up no quoting a lot of business. We end up turning a lot of customers away. But at the end of the day, it's a hedgehog model. We know that we have concept mastery over this one thing. And if it's outside of that scope, we just will not do it. Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do you get the next generation to buy into that we do the one thing? Because I'm not picking on anybody, but with the advent of the smartphone, like, I can program Adrenos and I can design in Solidworks for makers and I can do all of these other things. How do I focus my attention, right? Because TikTok is 30-second videos. So I'm now in this lost world of anything and everything. So how do you get the next generation excited about coming in to be an expert in this one thing that we do really well?
Yeah, and it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, but I think and there's two things at play there. The first is, I think, one of the biggest challenges, and that's getting the younger and the youth and some of the younger talent involved in the STEM type fields: science, technology, engineering, and math. Very, very pro STEM. And a lot of people, this is probably going to be controversial, but a lot of people like to add art into that. And it's like, no. Yes, SolidWorks is an art, and when you're designing, there is art to that. But the problem that our society has is there isn't enough scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians. I think it becomes a little easier to train an engineer on how to properly use SolidWorks, for example, to design a piece of art that is actually a movable structure. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to take an artist and train them in the fundamentals of thermodynamics and complicated chemistry. And so I think what our world really is lacking is those STEM fields. And so if we could get some of the youth, even some of the underrepresented minorities involved in some of those fields, I think society as a whole could really be doing much better for itself. And then as you start to flood these fields with that, I think then you get some of the artists and storytellers. We last time we were on stage together, we were with Megan, and she's a storyteller. And you get these artists that have that enduring background that can come in and tell the story of manufacturing, or tell the story of a boring manufacturing company like ours, that if the lights went out in our company, you're not building cars within 48 hours. And there's 10,000 types of businesses just like mine who are in that same position. And so I think that people don't truly realize the intricacies that it takes to build a 10,000 component automobile and have it turn on every single time across 14 to 17 million vehicles produced every year. And in 10 years, that's 140 million vehicles that seem to always turn on every time. So it's quite remarkable what the industry and what society has done, and the next generation is going to take us there. And it's going to be exciting to see what excites them, what gets them motivated. It might be the 30-second TikTok clips. It might just be getting out there onto the shop floor and seeing it for the first time. And so yeah, it's yet to be seen what's going to be that key motivator, but I think we are seeing it. It might not be to the numbers, but it is out there.
Well, I think, human nature in general, no matter who you are, there's satisfaction in creating. And there's way more opportunity to create now than there was in the late 70s, early 80s, which was better than the 50s or 60s, which was better than the 20s or 30s, right? Like it always grows to where you have more opportunities to build and create. I think the challenge from what I see is there are an enormous amount of the younger generation that want to create, but there's no outlet for them to get started, right? Because there traditionally isn't a focus, right? Like you can be anything to anyone, and all you ever hear is be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And so the idea of creating gets lost in this focus of what society wants. But what society really needs is people that can actually create. And to me, what STEM helps with is giving a direction to the creation of those components. I think the other thing that comes with it too is, you go watch, my favorite reference is Iron Man, right? He builds his first suit in that cave and it's dingy and dirty. And then he flips over and he's in his shop and it's like touch screens and pop-up heads-up display and all this stuff. And it's like, manufacturing today is more like the second part when he builds his suit than the first part. However, most of society thinks manufacturing is the first part. And I would assume in your company, you've said stamping is boring. I don't think stamping is boring. There is an enormous amount of cool stuff in there, especially when you're talking designing dies and pressure plates and, ejector pins. All that stuff is really, really cool. But even your company and what you've done has transformed to be way more high tech than it was before, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about how that's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. And believe me, the last part that for me, that I don't think stamping is boring at all. But, when you try to explain it to, let's say a 10-year-old who's thinking about being an astronaut or a fireman or a police officer, or, stamping parts up and down, it's maybe not as sexy. But yeah, so when we look at it, what we're trying to accomplish is creating that awareness. And you mentioned Iron Man, and one of the things too that I think is and if I get off topic and I'm not answering the question effectively, let me know. But one of the things that I am kind of not upset with, but I think we could do a better job of, and I'll ask you this, and I'm going to flip the script. In this country, how much money does it take to technically file papers and start your own company? I think that's something everyone should know. It's less than $30 if you're willing to commit the time. And so one of the things that I like to encourage people is get out there and start your business. Nothing is stopping you. I mean, nothing stopped Iron Man from tinkering, in his garage. And, the only thing stopping you is the fear of rejection. Well, I can tell you right here, right now, I've started 4 companies. 2 of them are no longer running, and 2 of them they're running. They're not all that successful. And guess what? I'm so much better for it. Certainly, I've changed. Felt like I changed the world. You know, one of the companies aimed at looking at batteries, AA batteries that were literally being landfilled, thrown away, and a company's called Recharge L3C. Currently, we employed people who are physically blind. They didn't have other avenues, and we hired them, but surprisingly not as much as you would think. I mean, less than $10,000. And you know, the risk is out there, but look at the positivity that can be brought from that. And these types of things exist in droves out there. I mean, there's so many avenues where people can either make a living or come up with a side project or a side hustle or whatnot that you might be able to change the world. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg very publicly dropped out of his second year at Harvard to form Facebook. I mean, the guy's a billionaire. So, you know, take the risk, take the gamble, make sure you're not necessarily betting your entire house, and, you know, you want to keep yourself and your family safe, but there are ways to do it that I think it's not encouraged enough in our society about how really it is easy to, you know, to come up with your own company and go out there and make.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a couple things that you sort of brought up which are always interesting to me. There's this perception, especially in the United States, from what I can see, that if I try and I fail, that's it. It's all or nothing. And, you know, a lot of families put pressure on, you know, there's always one person in the family that always has this idea and is always trying to move the needle to do something. They may not always do it the smart way, but they're always like dreaming of doing something. And then the rest of the family is always like, oh, no, you need to get a stable job and do all this stuff. And it sort of discourages those people, right? Where what we should be doing is like, hey, keep your job. That's great. But, you know, figure out how to make this work. And it's funny as you're talking there, because when I became an author, you know, I woke up one morning and I'm like, you know, doing this tech support for 6 states by myself, this is ridiculous. I need a method to take what I know, take the knowledge I have, and give it to all the customers to be successful. And so I just started writing a book, and it took me a year and a half outside after hours, you know, doing my own thing, and, you know, and it went out. And did it sell a lot? No, but I got to meet a lot of really cool people from all over the planet. And it's funny, when I stopped doing my book, that's when all the comments started coming in of like, oh, hey, I'm trying to buy this, I'm trying to buy that. And, you know, there was that satisfaction of like, I didn't change the world, but it was an experience. You know, I like going down that path and creating those components and doing all that, even though it's just text on a page, is something that gave me confidence that I would probably never get anywhere else. So I'm 100% in alignment with what you're saying, because everybody needs to just try, because you never know, the thing you're trying might be the actual passion that you have.
Yeah, and what you also don't realize, and you might come to realize this, is your first book was your learning curve, and you were doing that, and you were learning how to learn, and you were learning how to be an author and what it means to be in copyright. And you said it, not me, that you didn't change the world with this book. So that's probably still not for sure that you still could have changed the world with that book. But for your sake, on your argument, let's say you didn't, guess what? Something might happen, and you might decide, wow, I'm at the cutting edge of Solidworks Live, or I'm at the, you know, something, whatever it is, something you're doing maybe in your profession, and oh, by the way, I'm now going to write a book on this. And instead of that being your first book, you've already got a whole book's worth of experience, contacts, connections, processes in place. And now writing that second book's going to be way easier. You're going to know what you need to do. And maybe that's the book that ends up changing the world. And you can argue, well, would you have written the second book as well if you didn't write the first book? And, you know, it's that incremental advantage we were talking about on the website. You know, did my compound tooling hit because of the compound tooling, or was it that incremental progression on the website? And so, yeah, every step, you know, it's it's one of those phrases that people say with their eyes rolled, but in order to run a marathon, you actually have to take one step. Like, you need that step. And if you don't take that step in that marathon, guess what? There are no other steps after it. And starting a business, writing a book, changing the world it is no different. I mean, very small steps. I mean, just something as simple as we talk changing the world. I was approached. I'm kind of an outspoken guy. I like to talk. I'm, kind of outspoken. And I was approached to join the Harrison Township Economic Development Corporation, very small board in my local community. And it was a board. It was a great board. We did a lot of very good things for the community. And all I did, for the most part, was say yes. I mean, I said yes, and you show up once a month to a board position, and flash forward 2 or 3 years later, I'm now the executive chair of the board. I'm helping to do things that this community hasn't seen, and we've been able to get a bus stop that drops off into local areas. So we're bringing in communities that are, for the most part, underserved, and a lot of them are just their underserved areas. We're bringing jobs to those types of labor markets, and we're doing job fairs for the local high schools. I mean, none of these things were done. And you can say, well, that's easy, Jeff. You're the executive chair. You can just tell everybody that that's how it's going to go. But if I don't say yes 4 years ago to the board position and learn the ropes and learn from the mentors on the board, then become chair and say yes to that. Does this community have this big job fair that employs hundreds of high school students? Does it have a bus stop? It doesn't. So did I change the world, by joining the board, 4 years ago? I probably didn't. I probably really didn't. But then all of a sudden, we build on it. Does adding a bus stop to 1,500 available jobs right here in the STEM fields in my community that now residents from the city of Detroit have access to now dip into? In my opinion, I feel like that's changing the world. And so, to that point is I would just suggest to people, get on out there and start small, and don't be discouraged when you start small and nothing happens. Stay with it, stay on message, stay on focus, and incrementally improve yourself. Always continuously improve.
Yeah. And I think that's the big key, right? Because you talk about getting on the board, you talk about doing all these things, but what really happened is you made what you do aware to others, and other people made them aware to you, right? And it's all about that connection component. Because like you talk about writing a book, like I always thought, authors were in this strange world of creativity that did this other stuff. And although mine was technical and theirs is generally fiction that's most popular, now for me, it's like, oh yeah, I could write a book, like no big deal. Like I nothing changed other than my perception of doing it, right? So if you get out there and you do those things and you interact with the community and you try to make your piece of the world a better place, it really helps your confidence, but it also gives you a better understanding of the world around you versus what a lot of people seem to live in today, which is I'm going to turn on my TV and whatever they tell me, that's what it is. And I'm just going to be either angry or afraid or scared or sometimes happy. And it's a very skewed perception of just making your corner of the world better.
Yeah. I can even take that one step further, because there's probably a lot of people there thinking, well, geez, he, is a business owner. He's, owns his company. He's got access to connections and people. A great story, and I wanted to just give her a little shout out. We've got a big event next week flying down, but my sister, quite literally, one of my suppliers was throwing away this one piece. It looks like a sunshine. Her company's pockets full of sunshine. And I called her up and I said, hey, she was in special needs. She was a special needs teacher. And she had been complaining in the state of South Carolina, but it's this way across the whole country. These teachers work their little tails off trying to get these students with disabilities, want to get self-sustaining, want to, get learned and get up to speed. But then the problem runs into when they become adults and they're out of the school system, if you don't have that constant positive feedback and engagement, uh, things have a tendency of potentially going downhill relatively quickly if you don't have that cognitive stimulation. And told her what I had going with this vendor, just literally throwing away millions and millions of these sunshines. And she said, well, I can't start a company, Jeff. I don't have $10,000. I mean, this is what she said. I said, excuse me, $10,000? I said, okay, it's going to be 30. I've already looked. And you're going to do the starting. You're going to start the company. And she said, well, I'm not a lawyer. I don't care. You're starting this. I'm not doing it. Your lawyers aren't doing it. So this was maybe 6 years ago. She did it, submitted her paperwork, got her letter from the state of South Carolina. I'm now incorporated. And flash forward now, let's say 6 years, she's not even a special needs teacher anymore. Her nonprofit, which she's the executive director of, is able to sustain her full time. And they have programs that positively impact, I should use her exact numbers and I don't know them, but let's say 10 to 12 raise. She calls her adults with disability raise. And she's now able to quite literally make this remarkable positive impact on the city of Hilton Head down in South Carolina. And these 10 or to 12 beautiful, beautiful people where they're able to now produce T-shirts and they're able to serve the community. And really the community has just taken such a nice front role in her company and what she's been able to do. And so I just want to reiterate out there, anyone can make, if you've got enough passion, if you've got enough heart. You don't even need money. I mean, money helps. I'm not ignorant to think that money doesn't help. But oftentimes, those companies that are able to do it without the money, they get that track record. All of a sudden, you get an influx of capital. And you know, if you were able to do something on $1,000, if you're given 5, oftentimes it's not just a times 5 multiplier. It's like a times 30. Because you're able to make that dollar run so far. And so, yeah, I would say that to people in the manufacturing sector, in really any type of business, just go out there and do it. And you don't necessarily need the money to go out and write a book, to go out and start a podcast, to go out there and interview local business owners and learn from them. And last on this topic, to make $1 million in this country, it's actually extraordinarily easy. The model is proven. It's 100% proven. You can go out, take a poll of 100 to 200 people. The more people you poll, the greater of success you're going to be in terms of finding it. Ask them what bugs them. Give me the top 5 things that bug you. You know, it always bugs me that when I'm filling up with gas, there's always that little bit that falls out. I want that in my gas tank. Okay, whatever it is. Take the 5, and when you get that from the 200 people, you're going to have 1,000 things that bug people. Okay, 1,000 of them. The odds are statistically, if you're at 200 especially, that whatever bubbles up to the top of that bug list, you're going to have, let's say, 4 or 5 things that 50 or 20 or even 15 people said, what bugs me is this, okay? If you get 200 people, that's enough to claim statistical assurance on the entire population of the country. And so if you solve one of those 5 that bubbled all the way up to the top, it's statistical that if you took 200 and 50 of those 200, it will be less than 50. If 15 of those 200 had that problem, statistically, 15% of the country now has that problem. If you go solve whatever that problem is, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, I will guarantee you here on this program that you will make $1 million. Yep. And so anyone can do that. I mean, we did that. I've done that in some of my MBA classes, and you'd be surprised. You're like, oh my gosh. And then 10 years later, that bug list, you're like, that person solved that problem and they are now a billionaire. So yep. That would be some words of advice that I guess I could give your audience on the make side.
Which is really, really good, right? Because there's a lot of people searching for things they don't really know how to do it. And, you know, we all laugh about certain topics. You know, the first thing that came to mind was the ShamWow dude, right? Like,
Yeah.
we all laugh at that guy, but I guarantee almost every household has a ShamWow somewhere.
Including
you know,
his 8 houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably got
multi-millionaire.
You know, but it's amazing information for anyone wanting to get into it, you know, and start for that. And it is sort of funny because I haul cars and build hot rods on the side. And so, you know, I always have straps. I went away from chains, went to straps, and we were moving here the last month back to Nebraska. You know, I have like 15, 20 straps, and I was rolling them up, and I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way for this, right? And I'm like, I got a 3D printer. I can print some things to roll that up. And my dad borrowed one of my straps, and he just gave it back to me last week. And he's like, "Oh, hey, I got you this thing, and it's an injection molded plastic thing to roll up your straps." And I was like, "Where'd you get this?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, the little store down the street had these for the straps." And I'm like, "That's pretty impressive," because I was like, you know, this is a pain.
Yeah.
And every truck driver has these, like, you know, and I was starting to formulate in my head, like, you know, how I could machine them and manufacture them here. And I was too late to the punch, but it's those types of things, right? You're doing it. It's like, man, I hate this step. It's just a pain.
Yeah. And it's that easy. I mean, you had it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In that case. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just always.
Oh, by the way, how much can you now get on the open market, a 3D printer? I mean,
yeah,
there's 3D printers going for $100.
Yep.
And $50 in supplies, and you're off to a prototype race. So, I mean, yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff I've switched to, I got a 12 by 12 by 12. I think it's spent like $1,000, but I can do like PLA and super PLA and some of that stuff. But I use that for starting out, and then I go out to my machines actually I have out in the shop, and then I sort of finalize it. But like, I have those ideas. It's like, man, it's like 5 minutes, let it print overnight, come back in the morning, take a look at it. Like, it's so easy to come up with an idea these days, that more people just need to get started.
Right.
So,
yeah.
It does look like we are coming up at the end of our hour, and this discussion has been amazing, and I hope that we can have you back on in the future. And, you know, there are some things in the future we talk about which might be a little more pointed, you know, as far as MES and some of those things, if you're willing to come back on with us.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, no, I'd love it. And thank you and the team behind the scenes that have been just, you know, helping us out, you know, through this process. I've had a great time. So yeah, love to come back, and thanks for the opportunity.
And for the 3 or 4 people that didn't catch, what is your website?
Oh yeah, our website's www.northernindmfg.com. So it's
awesome.
www.northernindmfg.com.
Awesome. Jeff, I can't thank you enough. And for everyone else, we are moving all these Manufacturing Live episodes to the Solidworks Live webpage. So you'll start seeing some of these show up there. So please tune in to future ones. And Jeff, I can't wait to have you back on again. This was an amazing discussion.
Thank you. Likewise. Can't wait. Take care, Mike.
Thanks.